crazy. And as it unfolded, I could almost hear football behind me saying, now why am I in it? Like, sure, there are definitely some meaningful conversations to be had about football, like player safety, and that we're more obsessed with celebrity than ever before. And also the unhealthy and sometimes even dangerous bubble that celebrities often construct around themselves. But this movie isn't at all meaningful. In fact, I would say it's instead salacious. And it throws gas on the fire, so to speak, in a way that's totally self-serving. Plus, I don't think anyone involved with this movie has ever played real football or is a true football fan. Yes, it sure seems that a lot of people outside of football have a lot of opinions about football these days. So the fact that these salacious criticisms are coming from an outsider's perspective, I think makes them criticisms that aren't really earned. In comparison, I think The Smashing Machine, which I'm seeing next week, but that seems to deal with a lot of the same issues, although not through the lens of a horror movie. It's not really a horror movie. We'll talk about that. But Dwayne Johnson, of course, is himself a wrestler. So he comes from that world and has had the same or at least very similar experiences. So he has not only earned the right to criticize, but I think that the wrestling community will be more open to his criticism or the criticisms of the film that he represents because he loves wrestling and they know that he's coming from a good place. Him? I got the feeling that it was extremely disrespectful of football. This movie does present some very interesting facts about the history of American football that I did not know going in. For instance, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of this. Its Native American heritage and also how violent the game used to be, with so many people dying from playing in 1 year that President Teddy Roosevelt had to step in and say he was going to outlaw it if they didn't fix it. And I double checked to see if these facts were true, and they are. Here's a cartoon from the time commenting on how dangerous the sport was. And the year that Teddy Roosevelt stepped up was 1905, and there were 19 deaths that year from playing football. Isn't that remarkable? And so I think it's great to bring those facts to light, but they're presented here in a very skewed and aggressive manner that I think will cause many viewers to just reject the information rather than consider it and learn from it. I almost wish the movie was about the history of American football, to be honest with you. On that note, though, football today continues to become more and more diverse. We're seeing more and more black quarterbacks. We had a Super Bowl recently with 2 black quarterbacks, coaches, all hired by white majority owners, signing off on this. And then perhaps someday, speaking of majority owners, someday soon, we'll see a black majority owner as well. So is the NFL perfect in its behavior of race relations? Of course not, right? But from what I've seen, for the most part, and of course I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts down below, it seems that everyone gets along pretty well and are relatively supportive and respectful of one another, right? I think people are definitely headed, for the most part, in a positive direction. So I don't know what to make of a movie about the NFL that draws such strong racial lines in the sand and presents the kind of conspiracy theories you think you'd only find in the darkest corners of Reddit and Discord, not in a major Hollywood movie. Look, like I said, nobody is denying that the NFL has its problems. Like it hasn't also made its best efforts in terms of looking out for player safety. However, it's a much more complex situation that is presented here. Like, there are helmets available now that significantly reduce the likelihood of a concussion, but they look silly. So players are willing to wear them for practice, but a lot of them refuse to wear them on the field for actual games, even though that means they're still putting themselves at tremendous risk. Also, for all the behavior in this movie, I wish that they had made a connection to the damage done to players from concussions. I think that would have been an important parallel to draw. You know, again, it's very self-serving instead of trying to do something actually for the players, even if it's through a genre lens. And I'm sure there are other regretful things that have happened in the history of the NFL, but there have been a lot of great things that have happened also. I mean, look at all the fans that football continues to have. Also, a very diverse group and a group that's becoming more and more diverse as the sport goes along. By the way, fans don't come off so well in this movie either. Now, the first half of the movie is actually pretty good, especially once you realize and accept that it's not actually a horror movie. It's instead a movie where horrifying things happen. And the movie cheats a little bit by having the team that it depicts, the saviors, have religious iconography, which sometimes includes demonic imagery, which is how they've been able to make it seem in trailers and in some parts of the movie like it does have supernatural elements, when in fact it does not. I would say a better way to describe this film is All About Eve meets Get Out, a very bizarre combination that the movie fails to make work. Especially in the third act when it just goes off the rails with crazy, provocative conspiracy theory, right? And ironically, as the movie becomes its most absurd, that's when it becomes cliche and loses all of its originality. You're like, oh man, I've seen this before. But it sure looks good, and it has some very solid performances. So let's start with the visuals. Him consistently throughout the film looks like a high art, glossy ad campaign for sports. Sports! Especially when we get to Isaiah White, played by Marlon Wayans, when we get to his compound out in the middle of nowhere. It's a little bit Don't Worry Darling like at points as well. And the setting, what a great find for the movie to find this house. It seems like it's straight out of Architectural Digest, and the design is just, it lends itself so well to the film. Especially not just the structure of the house, but how it uses light, both natural light and lighting installations, to create just some gorgeous and stunning visuals. The cinematography and the framing, along with the production design, they basically just use the house. But, there's more than that. It's really, really strong. And as the story starts to get a little crazy, they do some cool things by bringing in X-ray and heat vision visuals. That was cool. For a movie about football, they play a surprisingly little amount of football, despite Isaiah having a covered football field on the premises. But it was interesting, at least for a little bit, to get a glimpse at how quarterbacks train and work on their precision. Like, I've never seen this little net before, where you throw the football into the holes. That was really cool. Now the performances. So Tyriq Withers, at over 6 feet tall. We're getting some tall actors these days. David Corenswet, Withers. And Withers certainly has the stature and the look of a young sports god. The camera loves him, and he's fine. But he came across to me more like a model turned actor than a legit actor. Maybe he'll get there. But he just didn't have the strength of personality as Marlon Wayans, although Marlon Wayans is tough to compete with. And this movie, without a doubt, belongs to Marlon Wayans. He can smolder as good as Withers. He looks a good 10 years younger than he actually is here. But what really makes him pull ahead, as I said, is the power of his personality. It was a great idea to hire a comedian for this role because Wayans does a fantastic job portraying Isaiah White's highs and lows. His madness, which is a big part of his charisma that makes him seem bigger than life. I mentioned that this is a little bit of a commentary on celebrity bubbles, and it captures that quite well. It's a really out there role, but Wayans believes in it with every fiber of his being, and because of that, he makes us believe in the character. He's electric here. Very strong performance. I also have to give credit to Julia Fox, who plays Isaiah White's wife, who actually leads a life this bizarre. And perhaps that's partially why I want to give credit to her acting skills, but I think she has experience, just like they say, write what you know, it helps to play what you know. And she really makes the story seem more real when she's on screen. She does an excellent job and captures a type of woman that seems to be more prevalent than ever these days. Again, it's hard to take her very seriously as an actress because of a lot of her real life drama, let's say. But she really stood out in Uncut Gems. I thought she was fantastic in that movie. And I have to say, she does a great job here once again. I think she is a good actress. All right, so any other standouts? There's Australian comedian Jim Jeffries playing Isaiah White's personal physician, and he's good. He pops, I think, because of Jeffries' personality. But what a missed opportunity when you consider the horrific damage that private physicians have done to celebrities over the years. Michael Jackson's killed him. They could have done so much more with this character. It could have been a really powerful and striking commentary. But instead, it's played very soft and light, just more like somewhat like, oh, something sketchy about this dude. And then he kind of becomes a comedic character. Like, Personal physicians have so much more power in these situations that it was weird that this character was not portrayed as having that same sway over Isaiah White. Naomi Grossman also makes an impression as a crazed fan. Although I backtrack to that, I also want to say, sometimes these physicians kind of fade into the background, but yet have tremendous effect. And that wasn't, there's different ways they could have gone with it. But it was almost like, as I said, disrespectful to just write it off as like a quirky situation when it's just such a real life problem. All right, so Naomi Grossman also makes an impression as a crazed fan. A cross between Gladys and Lady Gaga, that's the vibe I was getting there. So at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of great elements here and a lot of potential. But instead, the movie ends up being very self-serving, salacious, and very surfacey. It was a blacklist script, the list of scripts that are so good that can't get produced. And this one eventually did get produced. And Justin Tipping came on as director, and he also has a writing credit, which means he came in and he rewrote that original black script. And maybe just because there's no one else credited doesn't mean a couple other writers didn't take a crack at it as well. And maybe they stripped out all of what made the original script special. Or maybe it was never there. But as is, I'm having a hard time believing that this would be a blacklist script. It also seems like a very early script in someone's career when they're doing a lot of cheats and they're not really earning things. That's a good way to describe this. I wouldn't say this feels like a blacklist script. It feels like a spec script that might get you an agent or in the door, but they're like, no, we can't actually make this. It's a mess. But I see where you're coming from, and let's see if you can do a little better. Now that you have some professional guidance. The professional guidance here, of course, is supposed to come from Jordan Peele, who here is a producer. And it's weird to have him have a film that is so salacious and self-serving and surfacey, because his films, even when they don't always work, I think have tremendous meaning and commentary. At least him is telling a story of the Black community and gives an opportunity to a lot of talented Black actors, which has been one of Jordan Peele's mission statements as a filmmaker and a producer. I'm just not sure who this movie is for. It certainly isn't for football fans, and it's not for horror fans either, because it's not a real horror movie. Plus, it's devoid of the intellectual commentary and emotional meaningfulness that would make it appeal to the art house crowd. It looks cool. You know what? This is how I would describe this movie. Low-level Ryan Murphy, who is very prolific, and I love Ryan Murphy. I watch all of his stuff, and when he hits, he hits. But when he misses, it doesn't happen often, and it's still watchable to a degree. We'll see. It depends how much you like football, whether or how much you were hoping for a true horror movie. But yeah, I think low level, like a Ryan Murphy miss, is a great way to describe him. And that hits theaters this weekend. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.